Hey folks, welcome. I'm Sam Faddis, and this is Ground Truth, where we try to get past the hype and the spin and the nonsense that passes for news these days and talk about reality, at least for a little while. Today we're talking about guns, gun laws, and what does and does not make any difference. A few years ago, in my home state of Maryland, the state legislature, in its infinite wisdom, passed a gun law, one of the strictest in the country, modeled on legislation we've seen multiple times in other places. And the legislation really has sort of two tracks. The first track is an outright ban on so-called assault weapons or assault rifles. That's kind of a nebulous term. You hear it a lot used in gun control circles. Doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot to folks who really know firearms. The definition's pretty loose. The general idea seems to be that we need to get M4s, M16s, AK-47s, things like that off the street because I suppose the idea is that's how people are being killed in the United States with those kinds of weapons. The second track in the legislation is a whole series of measures that make it harder for law-abiding citizens to buy guns. So there are now additional hoops in the state of Maryland that you have to jump through if you want to actually go out and do the right thing and obey the law and buy a gun. Opponents of this legislation and similar laws all around the country have said for a long time, look, this is all well-intentioned, but it doesn't actually do anything to make us safer. Almost nobody really gets shot with these so-called assault rifles, relatively speaking. And criminals don't go to gun shops and fill out paperwork and buy guns. They just buy them out of the trunk of a car somewhere. The debate has raged back and forth for years. Not a lot of data that's comprehensive to really fully resolve the question until now. Just this month, January 2019, the Department of Justice released a very comprehensive study where they went out and looked literally at hundreds of thousands of prisoners incarcerated in state and federal correctional institutions all across the nation, figured out who had had a gun when they committed the crime that got them locked up, where they got it from, what kind of gun it was. And the results are amazingly conclusive, really, really hard to argue with. To begin with, type of weapon, not surprisingly, 90% of the people committed a crime had a firearm, had a pistol. Long guns of all kinds, not just assault rifles, but all rifles, all shotguns, everything that's a long gun, roughly 10%. That's pretty straightforward. They are expensive and they're really hard to conceal. The data in regard to where the weapons came from, just about as conclusive. Almost 60% of the folks locked up because they committed a crime and who had a firearm on them, with them, in the commission of that crime, almost 60% got the gun one way or the other illegally. They either stole it outright, they got it off the black market. One way or the other, it came completely outside of legal channels. Almost all the rest either borrowed the weapon from somebody or had it given to them. Only 7% of all of these prisoners actually were carrying a weapon that they had gone out and purchased legally in their true name at a gun shop. Only 7% would have even arguably been impacted by the measures that the Maryland State Legislature put in place. Interesting footnote. For years in gun control circles, there has been this myth that there is this gun culture out there buying vast numbers of weapons at gun shows, off the books, somehow off the radar, evading laws and regulations, and that these weapons are then flowing in vast numbers into the hands of criminals. In fact, the Department of Justice study shows conclusively less than 1% of the folks who had a firearm when they committed a crime obtained that weapon at a gun show. In fact, 0.8% of all of these people. It is statistically irrelevant. The entire gun show debate, nothing whatsoever to do with how criminals in fact, in the real world, put their hands on guns. The data is conclusive. One would hope it would make a difference. One would hope the debate would be shaped now by reality and not by rhetoric. But something tells me it's probably not going to be that easy. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Ground Truth.